In the history of human engineering, there is no greater lie than the one told in this room. The man at the console is Aleksandr Akimov. He is 32 years old. In exactly 45 seconds, he will be a dead man walking. But right now, he thinks he is safe. He thinks he is in control. The test has failed. The power levels are unstable. The reactor is stalling. Akimov makes the only logical decision a trained engineer can make. He orders the emergency shutdown. He presses AZ5, the Scram button. It is the ultimate safety brake, the kill switch. When you press this, 211 boron control rods are supposed to drop into the core, absorbing the neutrons and killing the reaction instantly. It is the brakes on the car. But Akimov doesn't know the secret. He doesn't know that the blueprint of this machine contains a fatal paradox. A trap laid by the Soviet state 10 years prior. The tips of the safety rods are made of graphite, a moderator, a material that increases reactivity. When Akimov pressed the brakes, the car didn't stop. It accelerated. He didn't shut down the reactor. He detonated it. 1 hour 23 minutes and 40 seconds AM, the lid of the reactor, 2,000 tons of steel named Aleksandr, is flipped into the air like a coin. The core is open, the monster is awake, and the first thing it does is taste like metal. The fatal machine. To understand why the world ended, you have to understand the arrogance of the world that built it. The Soviet Union didn't just build power plants, they built temples to the atom. And the RBMK 100 reactor was their high priest. Think of the RBMK reactor not as a high-tech engine, but as a giant, boiling kettle. A nuclear samovar, it is massive, cheap to build, and incredibly powerful. It runs on uranium, graphite, and water, but it has a temper. The physics are usually balanced. The fuel heats the water turns to steam, the steam spins the turbine. Simple, but in a standard Western reactor, if the water boils away, the reaction stops. The fire goes out. In an RBMK, it is the opposite. This is the positive void coefficient. It sounds boring, it is actually terrifying. It means that if the water disappears, if it boils too fast into steam, the reactor doesn't shut down, it gets hotter, which creates more steam. Which makes it hotter. It is a feedback loop from hell. A runaway train that creates its own tracks. Back in the room, the reactor has been powered down to low. It is unstable. It is poisoned by byproducts like xenon gas. It is essentially stalling. The operators are fighting to keep it alive for the safety test. To do this, they have pulled almost all the control rods out. Imagine holding a rabid dog on a leash. Now, imagine lengthening that leash until you are holding it by a single thread. That is where they were at 1:23 AM. And here lies the trap, the villain of our story. The control rods are made of boron, which stops the reaction. But the Soviet designers, to save money and reduce height, added a displacer at the very tip of the rod. This tip wasn't made of boron, it was made of graphite. Graphite promotes the reaction. Do you see the problem yet? When the rods are fully withdrawn, the graphite tips are sitting just above the active zone. If you press the emergency button to drop the rods, the boron doesn't enter the core first, the graphite does. So, when Akimov presses AZ5, he isn't pouring water on the fire. He is pouring gasoline. For the first few seconds of the shutdown, the reaction spiked. The power didn't go to zero, it went to infinity. The heat was so intense, so instantaneous, that the fuel rods shattered. They swelled up and jammed the channels, the control rods, the brakes got stuck. They couldn't go down, they couldn't come up. The graphite tips were locked in the heart of the core, radiating pure energy. The 2,000-ton lid, Aleksandr, severed all 1,661 cooling channels in a single violent heave. The beast had broken its cage. The invisible assailant. The silence didn't last long. It was replaced by a new sound, the sound of reality breaking. Inside the control room, the air had changed instantly. The survivors described a specific sensation. A taste, metallic sour, like sucking on a 9-volt battery or a mouthful of dirty coins. This wasn't dust, it was the air itself ionizing around them. Their own saliva was turning radioactive, the monster was already inside them. Anatoly Dyatlov, the man in charge, looked at the panels. The control rods showed they were stuck at the bottom, the reactor power showed 0. In his mind, the tank had exploded, a water tank, not the core. Because a reactor core cannot explode, it is physically impossible. It is like saying the moon fell out of the sky. He walked into the corridor to assess the damage. He saw broken glass, twisted metal, and a strange white mist hanging in the air. He didn't know he was walking through a cloud of microscopic fuel fragments. Every breath he took was a death sentence. Outside, the night shift workers saw something that defied logic, a beam of light. A ghostly, electric blue column shooting thousands of meters into the black sky. It was beautiful. It was Cherenkov radiation, the optical boom created when charged particles move faster than light through air. It was a beacon announcing to the universe that the core was wide open. But the most terrifying clue was on the ground. Valery Perevazchenko, the shift foreman, looked down and saw black blocks scattered on the pavement. Smooth graphite blocks. There is only one place in the entire power plant where graphite exists. Inside the reactor core, it was the equivalent of seeing a man's heart beating on the sidewalk. Back in the control room, the denial continued. Dyatlov ordered men to pump water into the reactor. "Keep it cool," he shouted. But as the minutes ticked by, the operators started to look healthy to healthy. Their faces turned a deep, rosy pink, then red, then a dark, brick brown. It wasn't a flush of exertion, it was a nuclear sunburn. The radiation was cooking the blood vessels under their skin. Dyatlov sent to trainees, Kudryavtsov and Proskyakov, to manually lower the control rods to turn a wheel that no longer existed. They walked directly into the reactor hall. They looked into the crater. They saw the burning red glow of the exposed core. They returned with their skin already darkening, vomiting violently. They had looked into the eye of God, and God was burning. The graphite deception. 1:28 a.m., the alarm goes out to the local fire station. Fire on the roof, asphalt burning. "We need everyone," Lieutenant Vladimir Provik and his men, including 25-year-old Vasily Ignatenko, gear up. They grab canvas hoses, they wear cotton uniforms. No lead suits, no dosimeters, they are driving to a nuclear war in their shirt sleeves. When they arrive, the scene is surreal. The roof of the turbine hall is covered in burning bitumen used for waterproofing. It has melted into a sticky, black sludge. As the men run across it, their heavy boots sink into the tower. Every step is a struggle. But it wasn't the fire that was killing them, it was the air. The radiation levels here were 30,000 times higher than lethal. One of the firefighters, Misha, sees a piece of debris blocking the path. He kicks it aside. "It's hot," he says. He just kicked a piece of the reactor core. Another man picks up a piece of graphite to look at it. He holds it in his hand. Later, when the doctors peel the skin off his hand, they will see the exact shape of that block burned into his palm. Ignatenko climbs higher. He is standing directly in the shine of the open reactor. He later told his wife about the sensation. It wasn't heat. It was pins and needles. Imagine your entire body falling asleep at once. A million invisible ants crawling under your skin. That was the gamma rays tearing through his nerve endings. Within 15 minutes, the nuclear hangover hits. The central nervous system begins to fail. Men start vomiting. They lose coordination. They fall down in the burning tar and can't get up. They think it's smoke inhalation. They think it's heat exhaustion. They don't know that their white blood cells are literally dissolving. They stayed on that roof until 6:35 a.m., 5 hours. They extinguished the fires on the roof of Unit 3, saving the rest of the station. They were heroes, but they were also sponges. By the time the ambulances arrived, Vasily Ignatenko had absorbed 1,600 Roentgens. A lethal dose is for 100. He was a walking corpse, breathing death onto everyone who touched him. The autopsy of a trap. The fire was out. The radiation was spreading across Europe. But the real mystery was just beginning. Valery Legasov, the chief investigator, wasn't just looking for radiation. He was looking for a murderer, and the evidence didn't make sense. The official story, the one the Soviet state wanted the world to believe, was simple: human error. They said the operators were reckless. They said Akimov and Topchinov were cowboys who disabled the safety systems to run a dangerous test. And to be fair, they did break rules. They did disable safety protocols. But Legasov found one piece of data that didn't fit the human error narrative. The data showed that the explosion happened after the shutdown button was pressed. Think about that. You are driving a car at 100 miles per hour. You see a wall, you slam on the brakes, and the moment your foot hits the pedal, the car explodes. It wasn't the speed that killed you, it was the brakes. Legasov discovered a secret document from 1983, 3 years before the disaster. It detailed a similar incident at the Ignalina nuclear power plant. The control rods had caused a power spike. The designers knew. The Kurchatov Institute knew. The KGB knew. The tip effect: when the graphite tip enters the core, it displaces water with graphite. For a split second, reactivity increases. Why did they build it this way? Money. To make the control rods shorter. They didn't put graphite displacers along the whole length. They left a gap, a hollow space filled with water. That 1.5 meter section of water at the bottom of the channel was the only thing keeping the reaction stable. When Akimov pressed AZ to 5, the graphite pushed the water out. He didn't know he was holding a gun. He thought he was holding a shield. The state needed a villain, so they put the survivors on trial. Anatoly Dyatlov, the man who refused to believe the core was gone, was sentenced to 10 years in a labor camp. He was arrogant, he was a bully, but he was right about one thing. If I drove a car with faulty brakes, he said, and I crashed, am I the criminal, or is the man who built the car? The operators were framed. They were given a manual with missing pages. They were trained to fly a plane that was designed to crash if the pilot ever tried to land it too quickly. The explosion didn't happen because they disobeyed the machine. It happened because they trusted it. The elephant's foot. December 1986, 7 months after the explosion. The fires are out. The reactor is buried under a hasty tomb of steel and concrete. But scientists needed to know where the fuel went. The core was empty, so where was the monster? They went down into the basement, under the reactor. In a steam distribution corridor, they found it. A 2-meter wide mass of grey, wrinkled slag. It looked like the foot of a giant elephant, but this wasn't just melted metal. It was a new substance entirely, corium, a mixture of uranium fuel, zirconium cladding, melted concrete, and sand. It had flowed like lava, eaten through to meters of steel and concrete, and settled here. It was incredibly dense. When they tried to drill into it to take a sample, the drill bit snapped. When they tried to chip it with an axe, the axe bounced off. It was harder than steel. In the end, the only way they could get a sample was to shoot it with an AK-47 rifle. They had to execute the waste to study it. But the most terrifying thing about the elephant's foot was its gaze. In 1986, if you stood next to it for 30 seconds, you would feel dizzy. 2 minutes, Your cells would begin to hemorrhage. 5 minutes, you were dead. It was the most dangerous object on the face of the earth, a Medusa that killed you just by being in the same room. Today, the beast is sleeping. We have built a massive arch, the new safe confinement, over the ruins. It is an engineering marvel, designed to last 100 years. But inside ... the food is still there. It is still warm. It is still eating into the concrete foundation, slowly moving deeper into the earth. We like to think of Chernobyl as an accident, a mistake. But it was a transaction. The Soviet Union bought cheap electricity. The price was a city. The price was the lungs of the firefighters, the skin of the operators, and the truth itself. The zone is now a sanctuary for animals. Wolves, bears, and horses roam the streets of Pripyat. They survive because the radiation kills them slower than humans do. The city is a ghost, but the lesson is alive. We built a machine that could destroy us. We put a safety button on it. And when we got scared, we pressed it. And it worked exactly as it was designed. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.